The Personal Atmosphere 10 Studies in Power and Poise by Frank Haddock. This book could have also been titled How to Activate Your Personal Energy Field, as it offered scientific observations regarding energy, the transference of energy, vibration, etc., as it applies to the human body and mind, which most of that was covered in the first half of the book. This second half will contain, in my opinion, the application, which, if practiced, can be of great value. The practice part is usually where most of us drop the ball. We know stuff, but too often we don't practice or apply what we know. Or if we do, we just try it a couple of times and then we peter out. What I've learned is that when we choose to implement a program or something new, according to Scientific American, it can take approximately 60 days to establish a new habit, but that number might be off as it varies from person to person. The author offers like a character profile list, which will require for you to be honest with yourself, and also, if you wish to raise your vibration, it will require on your part a state of diligent self-awareness, especially of your personal emotions as you're going throughout the day, and also perseverance of micro course correction throughout the practice period. And before you know it, you and others will begin to notice something new about you. Some of you may have noticed I have an eclectic taste, and I've been this way since forever. I believe that is what has allowed me to see beauty and discover treasures in the most unusual places. So, I hope that you will be able to extract a golden nugget or two that may be able to make your life just a little sweeter. So, if you just found me at this video, welcome. I'm glad you found me. And to my family and friends and fellow subscribers, welcome back. So again, if you're new and you just found me at this video, please go to the playlist so you can grab the first half of this book there. With that, let's get started into the second half. 6. Sixth study, the personal atmosphere analyzed. There are many kinds of personal atmospheres, depending first upon the character of the individual will, whether permanent or variable. Secondly, upon individual gifts or endowments. Thirdly, upon certain personal characteristics. 35. First order of personal atmosphere. In the first order are those suggested by the moods of will. These may be named as the atmosphere of feeling, the lethargic, the atmosphere of energy, the indolent, the atmosphere of concession, the insistent, the atmosphere of decision, the indecisive, the atmosphere of continuance, the fickle, the atmosphere of understanding, the non-perceptive, the atmosphere of reasonableness, the irrational, the atmosphere of righteousness, the unrighteousness. 36. Second order of personal atmosphere. In the second order are those suggested by natural gifts. The poetic atmosphere, the prosaic, the artistic atmosphere, the non-aesthetic, the musical atmosphere, the non-musical, the inventive atmosphere, the non-inventive, the logical atmosphere, the illogical, the scientific atmosphere, the non-scientific, the commercial atmosphere, the non-commercial, the oratorical atmosphere, the non-magnetic, the atmosphere of leadership, the subservient, the executive atmosphere, the non-executive, the judicial atmosphere, the non-judicial, the constructive atmosphere, the destructive. 37. Third order of personal atmosphere. In the third order are those suggested by certain personal characteristics. The altruistic atmosphere, the selfish, the trustful atmosphere, the skeptical, the intellectual atmosphere, the emotional, the reasonable atmosphere, the unreasonable, the practical atmosphere, the visionary, the sane atmosphere, the insane, the law-abiding atmosphere, the criminal, the ambitious atmosphere, the lethargic, the cheerful atmosphere, the gloomy, the hopeful atmosphere, the discouraged, the inspiring atmosphere, the depressing, the quiet atmosphere, the restless, the peaceful atmosphere, the stormy, the strong atmosphere, the weak, the brilliant atmosphere, the dull, the social atmosphere, the solitary, the attractive atmosphere, the repelling, the soothing atmosphere, the irritating, the polite atmosphere, the boorish, the gentle atmosphere, the harsh, the pure atmosphere, the impure. 7. Seventh study, advance suggestions. On the basis of these analyses, we may now perceive the value of certain advance suggestions. 38. On the will atmospheres, these are all subject to intelligent control and development if the directions of the power of will have been followed. These elements of your personal atmosphere have been already highly cultivated. Your psychic field is full of feeling, of energy, of a rational concession, of decision, of perseverance, of intelligence, of reasonableness, and of righteousness. 39. On the gift of atmospheres, these are endowments of nature. Examine the illustrative list to discover corresponding qualities in your own personal atmosphere. If you possess any indicated by the left-hand column, cultivate them to the highest possible degree without neglecting other elements of your character. If any are absent, or if your personal atmosphere is indicated by any word in the right-hand column, observe whether attention to that matter is feasible or will avail anything. You may be hopelessly prosaic or inartistic or unmusical or subject to the will of others, etc. It will then be a waste of energy to attempt the development of what nature has not intended you to possess. But, on the other hand, you may be now illogical, yet capable of acquiring the power of correct thinking, or a poor speaker, yet capable of improvement in that respect, or not constructive, yet capable of growing an ability to put things or ideas in order and together, and so on. In any such case, a demand upon your will appears. Will to improve in these particulars. This means self-culture and a strong power of will by exactly so much. 40. On the atmospheres of personal characteristics, these are all subject to the determined will. Compare your self-knowledge with the two columns. Wherever you perceive your personal atmosphere to be indicated by any of the left-hand words, study it in that respect. Note possibilities of improvement and use the psychic field to the utmost and for the best. Wherever you see that any word on the right hand suggests your personal atmosphere, become thoroughly familiar with the facts and determine to eliminate your psychic field all characteristics so indicated. It would be well to make these studies and efforts subjects of special thought and willpower for certain stated periods. Examples. 41. On the first order, atmosphere of feeling. Recognize the opposite, then ignore. Throw the greatest conscience and sustained interest into everything taken hold of for a day or a week. Atmosphere of energy. Throw the utmost sense of will into everything undertaken for a day or a week, and so on to the end of the list. 42. On the second order, the poetic and artistic atmospheres, recognize the opposite, then ignore. Elevate the mind to the level of poetry and art, with feeling and energy in all things carried on for a day or a week. Or determine to cast out of your life everything that is prosaic, or deformed, or non-artistic. Invest all things with a sensible feeling of beauty, order, nobility. Some people do this naturally and habitually. The masterful will can accomplish wonders in this direction. Make each study effort and exercise for several weeks to the end of both lists, adapting yourself, of course, to the requirements indicated by the words. Similarly, with the third order, these exercises here suggested are entirely practical. You can acquire any personal atmosphere, aside from some determined by natural endowment you desire. It will be eminently worth your while to make an exercise as suggested of each line in the three orders of personal atmosphere and proceed methodically to the end of all the lists. Having done this, return and make the left-hand words permanent symbols of the psychic fields of your life. 43. As you proceed, call upon the deeper self to feel, to make real in your inner moods the ideal of the atmospheres indicated on the left hand of the list. Affirm confidently that such named is your atmosphere, your mood, for a day or a week. Thus, with all the atmospheres in this list. We are creatures of habit, and habit has always to do with the subconscious or deeper self, as shown in the automatic action of the physical organs, as shown also in acquired and established ways of doing things which originally demand will. The deeper self, in the latter instances, comes at last to direct the necessary movements without our being aware of the fact. But we have habits of feeling and thought as well. These also have come under the sway of the subconscious self. If our physical movements and mental states and actions are habitually right, it is because the deeper self has been instructed thus to take charge of these matters. That self will do as we ourselves command. When we resolutely assume right, agreeable, ideal feelings, resolutely assume right, true, ideal thoughts, we instruct the deeper self to form corresponding habits, and in time, we actually feel and think as thus assumed. Then we become what we have assumed, felt, and thought. And so finally, we develop the personal atmospheres indicated by such feelings and thoughts. The inner attitude, at first assumed and continually asserted, then become real, or at last actually realized, has transformed us. This is the law. It is infallible. Before proceeding, however, read the remaining pages of this book. We now go on to a further analysis of the personal atmosphere. Such analysis yields the following. 8. 44. Eighth study. Significant propositions. Proposition 1. Every center of electricity and magnetism has its field in which the force is greatest, and from which that force radiates in every direction if permitted to do so. The electrical field is the portion of space in the neighborhood of electrified bodies considered with reference to electrical phenomena. Proposition 2, the human brain has also its psychic field, the personal atmosphere. Proposition 3, the body is gross matter provided with a nervous system extending to various parts in the surface. Brain energy is transmitted through the nervous system. In transmission beyond the body, it may proceed directly from the brain, or it may employ the nerves, or both operations may take place. Proposition 4. The brain and nervous system is surrounded by, let us call it, the ether, but it is also pervaded by such medium. It is immersed, as it were, in an ether bath, the material of which penetrates it throughout. Proposition 5. All bodily states, all nervous action, all mental activity, and mental conditions set the pervading and including the ether medium in motion of a vibratory character and in established ways and according to established laws, and these may be governed largely by will. Let us suppose a mass of jelly to be suspended in water. The slightest movement taking place within the mass will be communicated to the pervading and surrounding water. Any movement in the water will also be conveyed to the mass. Movement from the mass will flow outward until absorbed, or diverted, or increased, or diminished by other movements originating elsewhere. The movements occurring in the immediate vicinity of the mass will, of course, be most numerous and pronounced or appreciable. Some movements will continue undisturbed for considerable distances. If there are similar agitated masses in the water, the various movements may be communicated to one another, and they may be augmented or diverted or decreased or neutralized or transformed, each by the other. Similarly, for the illustration is suggestive only, with the brain immersed in the ether medium, brain and nerve energy create the field, the personal or the psychic atmosphere. In the field, the vibrations are most numerous and intense. Vibrations or movements extend outward from the field, and by the field, vibrations or movements are received. In the intervening space, vibrations from fields, from brains, meet or cross and are variously affected, as in the case of the supposed water impulses. In any field, incoming vibrations may be neutralized in many ways, thus making no impression upon the otherwise receiving brain. Or they may reach that center, either with original force or as augmented. In the latter cases, the receiving mind may fail of recognition because of distracting conditions submerging consciousness of their reception. Or again, being recognized as impressions, they may, for various reasons, fail of correct interpretation. They may also be transformed, so to speak, before reaching the receiving brain, and being then correctly recognized and interpreted, carry a different signification from that originally obtaining. If not thus modified, and if the two brains are in accord as to fields and as to conditions, and if various possible distractions are not present, the movements will be received, recognized, and interpreted in their original character. If such harmonious conditions obtain as between one field and the fields of several people, the vibrations will, of course, be greatly intensified. Let us illustrate in a general way without specific repetitions by coarser suggestions. If two sets of water waves that are exactly alike in height and in length from wave crest to wave crest meet in the same line of direction, so that the crest of one set come exactly over the troughs of the other set, the result will be a smooth or level surface. The waves are neutralized. If crests chance to coincide directly with crests, there will occur increase of wave height. Such hypothetical cases merely illustrate in a crude way the idea of a coalescence of movement and increase of neutralization of vibrations. The illustration might go on with suppositions of waves meeting head-on instead of coinciding in a forward movement, of waves making a cross sea, of waves coming together with unequal velocities, and so on and so on. We may have not only up and down undulations in a medium, but transverse, right and left, to and fro, movements of the medium. All fluids that we know transmit any blow that they have received by waves which undulate backward and forward in the path of their own advance. The ether undulates outward the path of the wave's advance. And we may think of rings like those thrown off by a smoker, meeting in all sorts of ways, rebounding, merging, neutralizing one another, in part or sufficiently to secure a smaller resultant ring, and so on. You are invited to concentrate here and to work out in your own imagination the various consequences of such meetings head-on and meetings up with all sorts of up and down waves, right and left waves, smoke rings, rotating from circumference to inner whole surface, revolving as holes along the line of outer circumference, wobbling, going ahead edge-on, or sidewise, or at an angle with the plane of whole circumference, and so on. If the effort becomes confusing, how complex then the ether movements of your personal atmosphere? You see, thus, that if you are in a state of agitation, your field is full of confused movements, that if your energy is controlled and directed in one general line of intention, your field is orderly and conveys its own movements without confusion. You see, too, that your unspoken influence over others depends upon the energy and harmony of etheric movements in your own personal atmosphere, for one thing, and for another thing, upon the energy or lack of energy and the harmony or confusion of their personal atmospheres. If theirs is chaotic, your waves can get into such chaos only accidentally. So also of the reverse, with their influence upon yourself. If their etheric movements are weak and confused, your ether waves may pass into their fields, excite the brain, and be read as signs by the mind and obeyed. If there is general harmony between your field and that of another person, the desirable influence will be mutual. So also of the reverse. If other personal atmospheres are orderly and energetic, such conditions may oppose your wireless movements, nullifying them, perhaps following back along the path of your defeat, and thus influencing you. All this, kindly observe, signifies deductions from the very latest science given us today. The suggestions may seem rather foolish to you, but you are invited to remember that there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. The author has known many a mind to begin with scouting considerations of the character of those found in this book, yet to end not only in profound faith therein, but in a larger, hopefuller, and richer and more successful life as well. Proposition 6. As nerve energy may be stored up, so may thought energy be accumulated. The brain may, through the will, store up the force of such ether vibrations. The field may, in turn, be deliberately charged. Proposition 7. Such impressions, similarly, may be conveyed to and stored up by the inanimate objects. The people are familiar with facts attesting the influence of things not to be explained by the operation of the senses or the imagination, or of communications between minds as suggested in this chapter. Things seem to acquire a character of a personal nature. Beyond the philosophy of light, the words of Professor John William Draper are true. Upon the walls of our most private apartments, where we think the eye of intrusion is altogether shut out and our retirement can never be profaned, there exist the vestiges of all our acts, silhouettes of whatever we have done. A shadow never falls upon a wall without leaving thereupon a permanent trace, a trace which might be made visible by resorting to proper processes. Photographic operations are cases in point. The portraits of our friends or landscape views may be hidden on the sensitive surface from the eye, but they are ready to make their appearance as soon as proper developers are resorted to. A specter is concealed on a silver or glassy surface until, by our necromancy, we make it come forth into the visible world. Radiant forces are passing from all objects to all objects in their vicinity, and during every moment of the day and night are daguerreotyping the appearances of each upon the other. The images thus made, not merely resting upon the surface, but sinking into the interior of them, they're held with astonishing tenacity, and only waiting for a suitable application to reveal themselves to the inquiring gaze. You cannot, then, enter a room by night or day, but you leave on going out your portrait behind you. You cannot lift your hand or wink your eye or the wind stir a hair of your head, but each movement is infallibly registered for coming ages. The pane of glass in the window, the brick in the wall, and the paving stone in the street catch the pictures of all passers-by and faithfully preserve them. Not a leaf waves, not an insect crawls, not a ripple moves, but each motion is recorded by 1,000 faithful scribes in infallible and indelible scripture. You can find that in the book titled The Soul of Things, page 278. And if this is true of inanimate objects, why should it not be equally true of living bodies, since here also etheric activities are incessantly going on. All bodies, organic bodies more especially, remarked Professor William Denton, are transmitting influences continually to surrounding objects, the tendency of which is to bring these objects into a similar condition to their own. Not more certainly does a rose diffuse its fragrance than human beings dispense their influence wherever they go. We are each surrounded by an atmosphere which can convey to sensitives the impression of our character and condition. Wherever the foot touches the ground, the impression of the man is left upon it, so that even the dog, by means of it, can track his master hours after he has passed over the ground. Houses become so imbued with the influence of the people that live in them that sensitive persons can feel that influence as soon as they enter. And if it is unpleasant, they have a feeling of uneasiness, of positive unhappiness, as long as they are subject to it. In perfect harmony with the above quotations are the following words from Dr. Hampson, speaking with regard to radioactivity. When we have realized that these phenomena are shared, though in small degree, relatively, author, by common substances, we may discover therein the explanation of many baffling puzzles. It has been an insoluble problem how an almost endless amount of sensation could be produced by an almost infinitesimal small quantity of material. A grain of musk can, without apparent diminution, distribute scenting material through the frequently changed air of a room for years. It may be that the olfactory nerves are sensitive to impressions not only, perhaps not at all, from molecules and atoms, but from the corpuscles into which they disintegrate. The simultaneous presence of different corpuscles in various combinations may produce as many and complex smell sensations as there are compounds of the elements. So exceedingly small quantities of material in the radioactive state may be able to produce as definite and appreciable effects upon the consciousness through the olfactory nerves as upon the electroscope by ionization of the air, its decomposition into oxygen and hydrogen gases. Thus it suggested that both by etheric vibrations and by emanations of particles, objects may produce permanent impressions upon objects and persons upon persons and objects. Intensely suggestive, therefore, is the following passage from President Edward Hitchcock of Amherst College, written so long ago as 1851. It is just as if the universe were a tremulous mass of jelly, which every movement of his man made to vibrate from the center to the circumference. It is as if the universe were one vast picture gallery, in some part of which the entire history of this world and of each individual is shown on canvas, sketched by countless artists with unerring skill. It is as if each man had his foot upon the point where 10,000 telegraphic wires from every part of the universe meet, and he were able, with each volition, to send abroad an influence along those wires, so as to reach every created being in heaven and in earth. It is as if we had the more than Gorgon power of transmuting every object around us into forms of beautiful or hideous, and of sending the transmuting process forward through time and through eternity. It is as if we were linked to every created being by a golden chain, and every pulsation of our heart or movement of our mind modified the pulsation of every other heart and the movements of every other mind. Wonderful, wonderful is the position man occupies and the part he acts, and yet it is not the dream, but the deliberate conclusion of true science. From page 439 of the book titled Religion and Geology. And thus we come to a further proposition, one of the most practical importance. Proposition 8. But matter is never at rest, and as personal ether movements are constantly passing from brains and constantly being received by brains, the accumulated impressions received from personality are, in weaker form, given off or reflected from immaterial objects. Observe the following. The clothing receives them. Do not wear the same outer garments for long without airing and change. Do not wear those of other people. Never put on second-hand clothing. They are impressed upon books. In using second-hand books, shut the will against any influence of former owners. Similar with furniture. If second-hand, it should be thoroughly renewed. Constantly used furniture should also frequently be renewed and rearranged. Like influences obtained with tools and various implements. Long used, they acquire some personal character and should be neither borrowed nor purchased nor loaned. If they have passed through a morose or evil or unfortunate history, the owner may well afford a new set. Frequented rooms and places store up this mass of human influences. The kitchen borrows the cook's character. The dining room registers the public family life. Sleeping chambers especially record the nameless history of undiscovered hearts. The writer is convinced that he has dimly sensed something of the personality of former occupants in various houses where he has lived. It is a common thought that rooms may be pervaded by the presence of absent people, sometime unfamiliar there. The atmosphere of a vacated saloon must differ vastly from that of a reputable theater, an art museum, a college, or a church. Proposition 9. Personal atmosphere exerts a marked influence upon others in certain familiar cases. It appears in the sick room, in magnetic persons or speakers, in successful detectives and gamesters, in famous diplomats, in some so-called revivals, in epidemics of a mental character, in vast popular movements. Here, especially, the influence of a strong will is apparent. Proposition 10. To the personal atmosphere may be attributed the origin of many deep and lasting friendships and loves, otherwise inexplicable, as well as of apparently costless and groundless aversions and hates. In its occasional overmastering power, we have an explanation of curious cases of personal subjection to others. It is often by brain or heart movements not accompanied by really offensive word or gesture that insult is perceived. The mind interpreting the invisible sign unerringly. Personal atmosphere often assimilates other people's thoughts. A spontaneous unanimity of expression thus frequently springs up all over a country, and discoveries and inventions leap forth in surprising similarity. Proposition 11. The personal or psychic atmosphere is, therefore, a subject of influence and communications, making for depression, exhilaration, hope, fear, courage, loves, hates, health, illness, moral forces, and the like. So also, unaccountable impulses, determinations, and freak actions may thus originate. Proposition 12. Psychic atmospheres, as has been suggested, may mutually neutralize their influence upon their owners, or they may raise or lower one another's tone, or they may more or less modify to effect different from those of either originally, or they may coordinate and thus cause mutual benefit or injury. Proposition 13. The psychic atmosphere is in character both positive and negative. One field may be now positive, now negative to another. One may also be negative to that of a second person, while positive to that of a third. Proposition 14. Personal atmosphere has further character. It may be good in a moral sense because of endowments, because of a healthy body or mind, because of helpfulness, because of its tone, and so on. An artist may possess a good moral field, or a field that is artistic whether moral or no, or a field determined by a healthy body or a healthy mind, or a field that is easily and beneficially excited toward others, or a field characterized by cheerfulness or courage or vigor or dignity or high purpose. It may be evil in a moral sense because of unenviable endowments, because of ill health, bodily or mental, because of indifference toward others, because of a low tone. The artist may not be moral. If moral, he may be endowed for inferior kinds of work. His body may be consumptive, or his mind may be more or less unsound or ill-balanced. His tone or temper may be low. Proposition 15. The personal atmosphere is usually partly good, partly evil. The items enumerated in the 2 above paragraphs suggest a large number of possible combinations. Good health, bad morals, high and correct artistic influences, a melancholy tone may combine to determine the field of one person. Proposition 16. The psychic atmosphere of one mind may be good in its action upon that of another, but evil in its action upon that of a third. The brain vibrations of fields do not always harmonize, do not always synchronize. He is not, to my mind. Apart from morals, the influence of a personal field is relative. Whether it is good or evil depends greatly upon the relation of one person to another, either permanently or occasionally. Some fields complement others, supplying what they lack. She is just his mate. Some fields excite others to intenser activity. That person inspires me. Some fields lower the intensity or tones of others. What a depressing person. The vibrations of some fields entering others overwhelm the latter. In his presence, he seems to lose his personality. Proposition 17. The personal atmosphere varies from time to time in the same person. Now the good or evil character prevails. Now the ether movements of the field are numerous, active, intense, forceful, clear of confusion. Now they are fewer, languid, weak, and confused. Proposition 18. The laws of action in personal atmosphere are simple. 1. Every good or evil condition of the field is attractive toward a like condition in another field and repellent toward an opposite condition. 2. If a person's psychic atmosphere is good, either now and then or prevailingly, he will by so much infallibly send out beneficial ether movements to all similar persons around him and will receive from them like beneficial influences. Conversely, a false or evil field makes itself felt upon people of its kind, and as well receives readily their ether vibrations. A perfect and healthy psychic atmosphere, morally, intellectually, and emotionally, possessed of a strong will, intelligently employed, would never yield to influences of an evil nature. But in all human beings, the personal atmosphere is of a mixed character. Hence, every person, even though possessing a psychic field in the main good or healthy, throws out vibrations of an evil and injurious kind, and the atmosphere of each is, therefore, subject to mal-influences swarming around it in inconceivable numbers and complexity. So also, few, if any, people are absolutely bad, but are causes of various good influences and subject to the vast sea of benevolent ether movements surrounding them. Proposition 19. The great and predominant characteristics of psychic atmosphere in its best estate may be expressed in the following words: health, self-control, intelligence, talent, education, will, energy, love, pride, hope, cheerfulness, belief, friendship, benevolence, justice, truth, moral purpose, and worship. Proposition 20. The evil personal atmosphere may be symbolized by opposite words: ill health, weakness, dullness, ignorance, flabby will, indolence, lovelessness, vanity, pridelessness, discouragement, irritability, melancholy, skepticism, unfriendliness, low purpose, selfishness, injustice, untruthfulness, indifference, and irreverence. Proposition 21. Personal atmospheres differ in nature as well as in character. The nature of the psychic field is determined by the individual's original constitution, its character by the quality of personality behind it. Character is the sum total of traits and qualities acquired by the use or modification of original endowments. Nature is the force with or against which every individual must work in determination of his character. Both the nature and the character of the psychic field are, therefore, supremely matters of will. Proposition 22. The laws and operations of psychic vibrations constitute the natural causes of social groupings. All other influence drawing individuals into combinations are accidental and artificial. Psychic segregation is of the nature of things and tends to permanency. Here is the orthodoxy of reason in heaven and hell. Proposition 23. Inevitably, now, it must appear that the will is the secret spring and power in all psychic atmospheres. Every human being has the privilege to make his personal atmosphere largely what he will as to modifications of original endowments, and altogether what he will as to character. The psychic field is the throne room of the will. A weak will means a feebly vibrant personal field, whatever the man's character. A feeble will cannot control its own atmosphere, nor send out strong influences, nor repel the ether movements proceeding from others. It can only yield its field to psychic control. A strong will vibrates its field, fills it with powerful ether movements, and repels or receives approaching influences as it chooses, equally irrespective of its owner's character. A strong and good will attunes with the nature of things, which is God. The region of noble character is here. Proposition 24. It is for the will then, 1. To originate and maintain and control the best possible personal atmosphere. 2. To draw into its own field the ether vibrations of others at its sovereign election. 3. To permit the incoming of other movements as it may determine. 4. To repel all evil and injurious influences. Remember, the attracting and repelling power of will acts through the psychic atmosphere of the individual. The weak cannot attract or repel the strong, except by affinity or repulsion of moral conditions. The good atmosphere will attract not the evil, but its own kind alone, and will repel the evil. The evil can attract not the good, but its own kind alone, and will repel the good. Similar laws obtain as to the nature of personal atmosphere. Hence, the vast importance of intelligent will culture. 45. The development and control of good personal atmosphere with endowments improved and character built up must therefore, for highest success in life, be powerfully and constantly willed. Ill bodily conditions attract evil physical influences unless will steadfastly opposes them, creates counter vibrations, and invites healthful incoming ether movements. Flabby intellectual creates a bad personal atmosphere, which must be transformed into a higher. the latter to be maintained by resolute determination to cultivate a vigorous and reasonable mind. The personal atmospheres of health, self-control, intelligence, education, will, energy, love, pride, hope, cheerfulness, belief, friendship, benevolence, justice, truth, moral purpose, worship are all products of strong, persistent, and right will power, and of nothing else, for the power not ourselves that makes for righteousness cooperates with will and never transcends it. These atmospheres may be created and mightily urged to attract their kind and to repel their opposites. If you will take these words just above, one at a time, and make each for a day or longer the center of thought and feeling wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, seeking to know all its meaning, trying to make it a part of yourself, endeavoring to be and to live that word, you will unfailingly develop its corresponding, that is, a strong and good personal atmosphere. Sink them into the latent mind. So, also, the atmospheres suggested by the opposite set of words may be gradually eliminated from your life by resolute and persistent exertion of the will. But this is to be accomplished not by thinking of the words or their conditions and trying to repel them, but by dwelling upon their opposites, and by determined shutting of the personal field against evil vibrations whenever made known in consciousness and as a permanent attitude in life. Interlude 46. And now we come to a very sovereign conception, one which at a certain stage in the individual's career places the whole responsibility for his body, his mental life, and his moral character upon the intelligent use of his will. When you perceive the force of the following paragraphs, you will see that your personal atmosphere is a matter of your own choosing. All the activities which take place throughout the body have been induced by processes which have appropriated activity from nature, decomposed and reconstructed such activity, and finally utilized its various phases in building structure and carrying on function. These processes have for cause, it is reasonable to say, what other can be said? The psychic factor, that is, the self. Thus, Lotze said, so long as the soul was regarded as indivisible substance, it could only be supposed to enter the body at a single instant and in its entirety, whereas if we renounce these ideas of an external conjunction or introduction of soul into body at some period of body's history, we need no longer wish to fix the moment at which the soul enters into a development which at first is supposed to produce only physical actions. There is nothing to prevent us from looking at the formation of the soul as an extended process in time, a process in which the Absolute gradually gives a further form to its creation. So, Professor Stump observes, I would even find no serious difficulty in the assumption that physical life, soul, was produced by organic processes, organic material, in particular stages of their development of every individual. When we reduce matter from a hard, abiding stuff to a complex of etheric or finer movements, and conceive of the medium of such movements as the thought stuff of an infinite reality within and behind all nature, such a theory of the origin of our psychic personality seems entirely admissible. But it should be observed that the command of the soul over its material environment must begin somewhere in its career, even though it have its origin in a material basis. The self is certainly to be regarded as a product of material activities preceding its birth, but it is evident that birth begins responsibility in self and the power in self to draw to its use those activities called matter, which it requires as a temple system in which to exist and unfold by reaction its wonderful possibilities. To unify a complex of activities thus appropriated and rearranged, and to hold together such a system as the human body. If then we conceive of the self as the final builder of the body, we must remember that it can do this successfully only as it works in conjunction with law. The law of laws of the whole process above indicated is the law of harmony. By this is meant a demand for action in accord with the requirements of the highest self and the nature of the body and the universe in which it exists. The power by which the whole process is conducted and by which it may be brought under the law of harmony is the will. 47. Let us think a moment of a magnetic field. The process of magnetization, says Sir Olive Lodge on the older theories, as conducted with a steel magnet on other pieces of previously inert steel, in no case really generates new lines of magnetic force, though it appears to generate them. We now know that the lines which thus spring into corporeal existence, as it were, are essentially closed curves or loops, which cannot be generated. They can be expanded or enlarged to cover a wide field, and they can be contracted or shrunk up into insignificance, but they cannot be created. They must be pre-existent. They were in the non-magnetized steel all the time, though they were so small and ill-arranged that they had no perceptible effect whatever. They constituted a potentiality for magnetism. They existed as molecular closed curves or loops, which, by the operation called magnetization, could, some of them, be opened out into loops of infinite area and spread out into space, where they are called lines of force. They then constitute a region called a magnetic field, which remains a seat of so-called permanent magnetic activity until by lapse of time, excessive heat, or other circumstance, they close up again. From the book called Life and Matter. This much might have been said in the older works. Even now, in the age of the generation of magnetism by electricity, the same conclusion must hold good, so far as it means that magnetism is not newly created. Whether or no, the older conclusions serves the present purpose. All that man rightly is, he transforms from an infinite source. He creates nothing save his own feeling and thought, but he may use every existing thing in the universe. And the meaning of life is this, that by as much as we come into harmony with nature's laws, by so much do we constitute each personality a field of power. We cannot create that power, we can only use it. By right use, we may constitute a region called a personal atmosphere. Thus, whoever will think himself, assume himself in harmony with the whole universe, assert by his inmost mental attitude that such is surely the case, and ascend in conduct to the level of the assumption and assertion, shall infallibly develop a personal atmosphere that shall draw all essential values to his life, adjust harmoniously with all right persons, and build within and about him a structure of human character more stately and fair than the Taj Mahal of India, comparable indeed to the majesty and order of the very universe in which, as one of its goals and triumphs, he finds himself placed. For a perpetual regime now, the student should observe the following. 9. 48. Ninth study. Practical rules. 1. First, in a general way concerning persons and things. Rule 1. Infected articles. Shun as much as possible all articles, furniture, books, tools, rooms, etc., which have been certainly or probably impressed by evil or non-helpful atmospheres. Rule 2. Mental attitude. In the necessary use of such, maintain the two attitudes of will, that of positive repulsion as to injurious influences, that of assertive invitation to beneficial influences from other sources. Rule 3. Renovation. When an unpleasant or injurious atmosphere is perceived in connection with an article, dispose of the article immediately if possible. If this is not possible, have the article thoroughly cleansed and renewed. Rule 4. Persons to be avoided. Shun all persons so far as may be who manifest or seem likely to manifest the evil or non-helpful atmosphere. Rule 5. Person attitude. If it is necessary to associate with them, maintain the negative and repelling attitude of will toward such atmospheres, but send out toward their owners all possible beneficial influences for their welfare. Rule 6. Receptive attitude. Maintain the receptive attitude of will toward all good atmospheres. Rule 7. Associations. Associate as much as possible with people of sound health, of cheerful disposition, of intelligence and education, of benevolence and moral purpose. Tone up your personal atmosphere by contact with such. Rule 8. Willed idealism. Resolutely, persistently, and intelligently maintain a true and strong psychic field by constant exercise of strong will power toward all high realities, beautiful objects, right ideas, health, peace, truth, success, altruism, right-minded persons, the best literature, art, science, the noblest movements and institutions of the times, and a true religion. Rule 9. Environment. Surround yourself as much as possible with objects, forms, colors, circumstances, etc. that are agreeable, and exercise a cheerful and uplifting tone upon your personal atmosphere. Begin by thinking beauty and good cheer. 49. 2. Secondly, as to contact with other people for legitimate personal ends. Rule 1. Magnetism. Preserve a right and full personal atmosphere in which all your ether movements are open, frank, honest, sympathetic, etc. Rule 2. Closed door. When desiring to maintain your own counsels, close the personal field to the interrogations and receptivity of other psychic atmospheres with reference to such matters. You do this by mentally saying, "The door is closed to you." Rule 3. Discovery. Within the limits of goodwill, open the field to all communications proceeding unconsciously from persons with whom you are dealing. You do this by mentally saying, "I am discovering your intention and character." But these things must be said intensely within your deepest soul. Rule 4. Diplomacy. Whenever the unfriendly atmosphere is perceived in others, keep your field open to recognition of hostile influences, but closed to disturbance within. You should recognize these influences, but oppose to them the resolute will. Rule 5. Good will. Meanwhile, throw out toward such antagonistic atmosphere intense vibrations of the utmost goodwill. You may not be inclined to do this. But it is perfect policy for self-interest, to say nothing of dignified moral character. Intensely wish them goodwill. Rule 6. Triumph. On discovery of instinctive antipathies felt on your part, follow Rule 4 and 5. The will may overcome these antipathies up to the point of discovery of their cause, in yourself or in others, and it is then for will, if right aims in life require any attention thereto, to set about the task of removing such cause. But if the case becomes hopeless, revert again to Rule 4 and 5. Rule 7. Resolute friendliness. In seeking the legitimate control of others, bring to them the friendly but assertive movements of personal atmosphere. Rule 8. Friendly authority. If you desire them to be or to do certain things, vibrate by resolute will action appropriate requests into their psychic fields. Rule 10. Right attitude. Always must your attitude be resolute, but not harsh, kindly, but persistent. Rule 11. Poise. In contact with other people, maintain in your personal atmosphere a perfect and constant calm. Bring your will to the center of your field and maintain absolute self-control. Let this be so complete that it may not betray the effort to secure it, either in disturbed ether waves or in movements which the other person's subconscious will recognize as coolness or suppressed hostility. Remember, your will action in your own field must be so strong that there may be created a surplus of commanding ether movements above those produced in control of self, and sufficient to exert a controlling influence upon the psychic atmosphere of the person with whom you are dealing. Avoid all excitement, send out no antagonisms, reveal to the inner consciousness of other people nothing in your mind calculated to injure their feelings. Banish from your field all feelings of contempt or ridicule. Permit no vibrations of anger or irritation to escape into your field. Banish absolutely all thought waves of fear for persons with whom you are dealing. Persevere. Banish all thought waves of distrust as to success with such persons. Maintain a personal atmosphere that is surcharged with the dynamic force of confident expectancy of good desired. Rule 12. Crowds. In dealing with people in masses, you have to contend with a constant play of force going on around different psychic atmospheres. You must therefore maintain your own as its best in the midst of innumerable and complex ether movements. With utmost alertness, keep your consciousness open to recognition of ether movements proceeding toward you, both favorable and unfavorable. In the one case, send out vibrations with redoubled energy to return those favorable to their originators so as wholly to secure such persons for your ends. In the other case, follow the above rules so far as appropriate. Rule 13. Rest. The law of rest requires that you should occasionally let up in your ether assaults upon certain kinds of people. Some personal atmospheres may be caused to vibrate so strongly and rapidly as to confuse their owners or to weary them. Leave these undisturbed for a time. Others cannot be made to vibrate your way except by reaction caused within themselves after a period of rest. Be patient. Rule 14. Adjustment. In still other persons, the psychic atmosphere is unresponsive, not easily vibrated. The problem here is to adjust yourself in such a way as to induce unconscious favorable vibrations. This may require the direct but concealed assault or the roundabout attack or a gentle initiation of ether movements within their fields which their minds will come to accelerate. If they do not discover your influence into harmony with your own ether movements, If they discover your influence, they will inevitably close their fields there too. Rule 15. Disguise. In another class of persons, the psychic atmosphere is always vibrant in repulsion of all influences recognized as personal. It is not you alone whom they antagonize. It is anything human. You must now transform your ether movements as muscular action may be transformed into heat or light in disguise. Any method which will translate your thought force into a suggestion appearing to proceed from things, circumstances, conditions, exigencies, a law of society or nature, etc., so that it seems to originate within themselves and spontaneously, will secure their interest in the movements of your field and induce their cooperation. Rule 16. Public speaking. In public speaking, the psychic atmosphere must be full, free, open, frank, honest, receptive, outgoing, active, intense, intellectual, emotional, clear of confusion, full of genuine heat and the light of the informed soul, purposeful, courageous, expectant of success, sympathetic, with will pulsing vibrant force toward the audience like a strong, steady, inexhaustible dynamo. If you are a public speaker, carry into every effort the thought of the above words. Commit the paragraph to memory. Repeat it while facing the audience prior to speaking. Charge up with its details and become saturated with its feeling, then summon the interest and masterful will. Rule 17. Mood of success. In all things, maintain the confident and expected mood of success. Rule 18. Constant practice. The substance of the above principles, and especially the rules, should be committed to memory and constantly employed by the will. Rule 19. Practical sanity. But the theory should not be permitted to carry you over into any feeling or state of mysticism. It is for the right mind always to hold itself firmly to the solid ground of common sense. 10. 10th study. Higher methods. You have now read the rules for developing and handling the personal atmospheres. Pardon the author for saying that a single reading cannot reveal to you their deep practical meaning and utility, much less master them. You are therefore invited to go over the directions given again and again and many times. Observe in this connection two great truths. 50. First, that thought grows. You read, you understand the words, but you do not perceive the entire thought represented in the words because it is not yet in you to command. It is there in the upper conscious self, in part only. It is there in the deeper self wholly, but not so far as you know and can use it. The fullness of thought must have time and attention for unfolding so that the deeper self can see, know, feel the entire significance of the words and thought employed in the rules, and then go on to cause the thought to grow up, like a branching tree, into your everyday consciousness. 51. One who had studied Power for Success for several years wrote, "Power for Success came to me immediately off the press. I went to work on it. It seemed meaningless to me at first. In fact, I read a good deal of it before I found anything that I understood very well. The subject was new to me. But when I did strike something that I understood, I saw it was what I needed and wanted. I failed to follow your directions specifically, but I read over about 6 or 8 lessons. Then I went back and I found I was able to comprehend your meaning better. Within a year, I worked through the book, practiced the exercises, and am still practicing them. After working in this book 1 year, I put it away 6 months ago. About 2 months ago, I went to work again. It seems like a new book. I'm getting much more now than I did the other time. Hence, I say I do not know what proportion I took in the first trip. It is a mistake about the first reading destroying the novelty. The novelty or sense of novelty is experienced at the instant you comprehend the thought, take in the meaning. You may read a dozen times and miss this. I have experienced the keenest delight and interest in passages in this book after I had read the same passages many times with a half comprehension. Either the truth you intended to convey or some suggested truth would open up on me. 52. Here we have a perfect illustration of the gradual growth of thoughts as the result of rereading and brooding, thus giving the subconscious self full opportunity. Newton was asked how he discovered the law of gravitation and replied, "By always thinking about it." This is the secret of all success. 1 year after the date of the above quotations, the author of them again wrote, "Power for Success continues to be my favorite in a library of 2,500 volumes, gathered at an expense of $6,000. As an evidence that I have worked, permit me to say that I can repeat scores of pages word for word and most of the verses. Not as evidence that I have got the vitals of the book do I say it. I simply mention it to show you I have not been idle. This book has been and continues to be a wonderful source of strength for me. If I could have had it some years ago, I sometimes wonder why the book is not sold by the thousands. I am looking forward with the keenest anticipation of delight to your forthcoming books. If thus you will return again and again to the present book, especially the above rules, and seek to gather in their whole significance, you will establish the conditions for the full unfoldment of the idea of the work, and the subconscious self will do the rest. 53. Secondly, the right personal atmosphere grows, or clears up and expands and comes under control of its owner. If evil, it comes to master the owner. But in order to the ideal end, there must be long practice of the thoughts and exercises and attitudes or moods of the rules. It is impossible to achieve the best results by superficial or spasmodic attention and effort. The personal atmosphere, you see, is precisely what you make it. That is, what your body of thought or general thought habits determine it to be. The requirements of time for the thought change and new thought growth is, therefore, the requirement for transformation of your old personal atmosphere into, and the development of the new personal atmosphere which you may desire. The necessary time element must also be accompanied by attention, deep and constant, to the matter in hand, the elimination of any undesirable atmosphere, and the development of a new ideal atmosphere. 54. The methods by which these results are brought about consist in 1. Ignoring any old undesirable thought, mood, tendency, habit, atmosphere, which is practically seen to be injurious, ceasing to think about or regret any and all such. No one can become learned by dwelling on his ignorance, not hopeful by nursing his misery. Thus you should banish all attention to any atmosphere which is not prophetic of good to your life. 2. Thinking every day for long the ideal atmosphere, any named one, considering how desirable it is, why it is desirable, and as surely attainable. Meaning by this, holding before the mind a picture of some definite atmosphere analyzed into its attractive elements and believing in its altogether possible to you and in your life. 3. Assuming, meanwhile, as much as possible that the atmosphere craved is really yours. Meaning by such direction, getting into the mental attitude of the atmosphere itself. When children play, they always assume mentally the attitude required by the parts acted. Suppose that the goal is the atmosphere of financial success. Just play that you are successful. With might and main feel that you are success and that all good things are surely coming your way. That is the idea. At first, in this matter, You will be conscious of feelings which are opposite to any one or another of the atmospheres listed on a previous page. But if you persevere in mentally playing the part, you will at last actually possess the feeling assumed. Then the feeling will beget corresponding thought action, and these factors will develop the atmosphere craved and sought in this way. 4. Asserting the atmosphere desired, which means that you make your whole personality, external as well as inner, declare to the world that this is indeed your bona fide personal atmosphere. You need not say the thing in words, you simply pose for the part as a fact. 5. Ascending to the level of the assumption and assertion. By this meaning that you force your daily conduct to correspond. Assumption and assertion incessantly instruct the deeper self to believe in the atmosphere desired as its own, and then to set all sorts of mental and etheric activities tending to develop your personal atmosphere, the same as named, any variety suggested to the subconscious region of yourself. But if you act externally to the contrary, you suggest to the deeper self that you do not really mean the assumption and assertion. When your external conduct agrees with assumption and assertion, all your suggestion runs one way, and the desirable result is as certain as anything human can be on this earth. 55. Now we all have our existence in the infinite. In ancient Egypt, the river Nile every year overflowed its banks and deposited a vast sheet of rich soil on otherwise desert sand. On the bosom of the Nile unfolded and blossomed the lotus plant. Thus the blue lotus of the Nile came to be poeticized by the Egyptians into the spirit of life. So we may say that each individual soul is a lotus plant growing in and flowering out on the bosom of the infinite all good. And this flowering of feeling, will, and thought in harmonious forms is just a way of permitting that infinite rightly to express itself in our individual life, or is just a way of aiding the process, which is the one normal thing in all this universe. I do not mean by this the loss of individuality. I mean the finding of it. 56. By so much as we come to a sense of oneness, harmony, not identity, with the infinite, by so much does our personal consciousness deepen, expand, enrich. There arrives a time in this process when our personal atmosphere is relatively perfected, and such a field of being and activity is developed as to ensure the expelling and repelling of all injurious feelings and thoughts, charged, so to speak, with hope, courage, confidence, and a sense of well-being and power that fills the entire personality. We are now in the full tide of success. We have arrived. Whatever we need for growth of real life, we now know shall surely come to us. We are, friend, masters of men and events. 57. These higher lessons seek to introduce you to the later degrees of the personal atmosphere. Some of you may not understand at the first. That is a common experience. Persevere, however. Be patient. Think always of yourself as expressing the all life. Continue trying to reach out after the broader and higher states of being and doing. Sooner or later, you will grow into or discover that consciousness of the infinite, that sense of at-homeness in the universe as a part of its greater existence, that assurance of personal wealth and power, which are of more value than riches and thrones. You will have indeed what you need. 58. I walked the streets of Boston. Suddenly it seemed that the top of my head had been lifted, and I became aware of an immense increase of personal consciousness. I became conscious, I say, I know what I'm writing, of the vast sky above, and the mighty deeps below, and the wide sweep of present human life, and the long forward and backward stretch of human history. It seemed that I could sense the all. Since that day, all is well. Life is deeper, richer, stronger, assured, fearless, and saturated with perennial vital interest. 59. All this will read strangely to some of you. Very good. There's no coercion in these pages. But if you will digest and assimilate the suggestions of this book, you also will feel the eternal Nile of life flowing onward through body and mind, and will know yourself as emerging at last into that infinite personal atmosphere in which exist and revolve worlds and systems. 60. Long and persevering must the practice and exercise be, by which power to direct thought and feeling may be attained, and by which the sense of identity, harmony, with the universal self may be established. For without this latter, all our work, the masterful will. And so for the first reading closes, may it be followed by many, with words, the significance of which seems well nigh inexhaustible. The beginning. Nescia virtus stare loco. We have now reached the end of the book titled The Personal Atmosphere, 10 Studies in Power and Poise by Frank Haddock. If you found any grain of value in this content, please like, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe. I look forward to being with you again at the next video here on my channel. Be blessed.